Again, thank you so much for your time today, man. Really appreciate it. Obviously, it's a very exciting time for you at the moment with a new record on the horizon.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you, with the career that you've had, with all that you've done, how do you define success as a person? Because we speak to different people with different definitions. So I would like to know, both as an artist, as a person, how you define success.
That's a great question. Yeah, the reason that's such an interesting question to me is because there's such a strong societal idea of what success is. But I think it's a really good moment to reassess what that potentially means for someone, because I think we've learned probably 1,000 times over that being on the cover of magazines or making a shit pile of money it's something, but it's not everything. And in fact, something I've learned is that if you the longer you wait to address some of your stuff, I guess we'll call it with heavy quotes around it, and the further into your, once again, quote, success that you go, carrying that stuff with you, you end up just basically financing your neuroticism. It just puts any of your unturned stones and the stuff that kind of creeps out from under them on steroids. So to go back to the original core of your question, what for me defines success? To me, success is continuing to do my best to speak authentically and to make the things that feel wonderful and beautiful to me. So I feel successful like when I'm writing a song and it's naturally inducing an emotional response in me. What I'm making, it means that I'm tapping into something authentic, and sometimes it doesn't even need to be shared with everybody. Sometimes it just needs to exist on, in a file somewhere on my desktop, and I can go back and listen to it every once in a while. And I am able to glean a great deal of emotional gratitude from the experience of having known how to let that feeling out into a song, or in some cases onto a canvas, like to paint something where you feel an unfettered flow. And that to me feels so successful. If lots of people look at it or lots of people hear it and applaud it, that's a lovely thing, but it can't be the only thing that dictates success. It's a nice part of it, but it's only a piece of it. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And before we move on to talk about, the new record and your art as well, and your artistic inspiration, I think there's a thing that I picked up on there about, dealing with stuff and confronting certain issues and things that you may have done over your career. What have you learned about yourself through the music that you've made, from your solo stuff, Incubus, of course, you've done a lot of solo records now. What have you learned about yourself as a person and as an artist, and how you've changed and developed from the start of your musical career, your musical journey, to where you are now?
Ooh, that's also a very good question. I suppose I don't have a kind of final answer to that question, because I'm still definitely in process. At 45 years old, I feel like I've learned quite a lot about myself, and quite a lot of the things that I've learned through the reflection of art. Art is a wonderful mirror to our subconscious. And it's also one of the things that's so interesting about it is that, we'll make albums and I'll paint pictures and create imagery and all these things. And so much of the experience is really like an upwelling from the subconscious, and I won't even fully understand what it is, sometimes for years. And sometimes it's through the reflection of someone that has listened to it or has absorbed it, and then I somehow am able to run into them, like a random person. This actually has happened to me quite a lot over the last like 5 or 10 years. Having had quite a bit of creative material out in the general populace now for some time. But then, you know, I encounter somebody randomly on the street or in a restaurant somewhere, and they will reflect to me back like, oh, you know, I really liked that song that I heard when I was a teenager, that, you know, that one that's about this, this, and this. And it's such a wild experience to have someone who you don't know tell you what the song is about. And then in that moment be like, oh yeah, it is sort of about that. Wow. And I didn't even realize it, you know. It's one of the fascinating things about art is that it speaks, it's like the voice of our unconscious, and it's the voice of like a collective unconscious in a as well. So what have I learned about myself? I've learned that I have a lot of learning to do. I've learned that it's not as much about me as it felt like it was when I was younger. I've learned to more successfully channel art, you know, so music and painting and imagery. The more I get out of the way, the better it is. And so it has less to do with me and less to do with my ego than I had previously thought. And so there's something almost kind of like, there's almost like a relief in that, where it's like, I feel like it's almost like I'm just a pen. The ink, like the good stuff, is coming from someplace that I don't really have the intellectual or spiritual capacity to truly understand yet. So it's almost like it feels like it's rushing through you. Does that make sense?
It does. I love that too, because it shows you're still growing. You know, we never truly stop growing. You're 45 now and you're still learning about yourself, which I think is a beautiful thing to reflect upon. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for sharing that with me as well. I mean, obviously, you know, you do have this new record, Echoes and Cocoons, but I might rephrase my question, because initially I was going to ask you how it pushes you in new ways as an artist. But it sounds like to me, again, you mentioned it's less about your ego, it's less about you and more about the flow. So perhaps the change of question could be, how do you feel like this new record flows through you? I hope you understand my meaning. Initially, it was going to be about, you know, how does it challenge you? But it sounds like music doesn't, you don't let it challenge you. You more let it kind of work with you, flow through you, kind of thing. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, to a degree, yes.
Right.
But there is also something, I think one of the reasons that I continually come back to music and feel delightfully compelled to return to music, with relative consistency, is that it is challenging. It's challenging to put a song together. You know, it's not rocket science, but it's close. it's not rocket science. You know, anybody can write a song, but not everybody can write a song that lots of people want to listen to, or that can be compelling after one listen. You know, so there are inherent challenges in songwriting from an intellectual and a creative point of view, but it's also challenging to learn how to put the eye of my ego aside enough, like to get out of the way enough to let music come through you. That in and of itself is a challenge, but it's a worthy challenge. And so that's one that I think it's another one of the reasons that I continually come back to art, is that it's easy and bordering on impossible all at the same time. So there's some type of a deeper sort of metaphysical lesson amongst all of it, which I think is another reason why it is captivating to me. And maybe that's one of the reasons why it's captivating to, you know, millions and millions of people who have been interested in art writ large for so long, is that it's easy to look or to observe a painting or a photograph. It's easy to listen to a song, but it's deeply intellectually and spiritually and creatively challenging to go past that surface layer, because it does, there are layers beneath it that exist, and they're potentially infinite. You know what I mean? Like all of the ways that one can interpret a painting or interpret a song are fascinating. And so that's another one of the reasons I go back to it. It's another one of the reasons as well that I still absorb music and film and art. Like to me, it's this limitless well. It's like a well that doesn't have a floor, and it's so fun to swim around in there and see what you can find. Every once in a while, the girl from The Ring shows up and scares the shit out of me, but fortunately, that's quite rare.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man, and thank you again for reflecting in that way about the music. Because I mean, I was going to ask you about a couple of the songs from the new record. Now, one person have always found your music to be very hopeful. I've always, used it to inspire hope and motivation for myself, for example. Now, if I describe your music as hopeful, if I say Pocket Knife and Petrichor have that hopeful tone, but then Diamond My Dryer is a little darker. How does that feel? How does that feel for you? Does that make sense? Like, are you trying to, I'll use the word challenge again. Are you trying to challenge the listener? Because again, there's those hopeful tracks, but it sounds like it's a little darker, certainly in tone on Diamond My Dryer.
Yeah. I think the tone and the aesthetic of Diamond My Dryer is a little bit more, there's a little bit more tension in that track. This is actually the first track that I wrote with John Congleton, who I wrote the majority of this record with, and he's the one that produced it and mixed it as well. It was the first track, the music at least was the first one that I heard, like a demo version of it, and I was immediately compelled by it because it was just there was a tension in it, like I said, and I really enjoyed that tension. But the lyric in the song is to me, it's actually quite hopeful, and it offers some contrast to the tension in the actual music. The reason I say that the lyric it has a glimmer of hope in it is the the metaphor, the dime in my dryer, as it were, is that clanking around in amongst the laundry of the day is the signal amongst a kind of cacophonous noise.
Yeah.
And so searching for signal amongst noise to me is inherently hopeful, because it is indicating that someone is looking. They're looking for hope. You know what I mean?
I like that. Yeah, I really do like that a lot. And again, thank you for that. 3 or 4 more questions now. In terms of, can you take me, because you again, I've always found in previous interviews, you're a very visual person. So if you could take me to a couple of your favorite experiences making this record, of you, or writing particular songs, if you've sat down somewhere and gained some inspiration from being outside somewhere, or a friend or a family member, can you give me a couple of really standout moments that you'll remember through all of your other records that you've made, and all the all the other stuff, memories that you will take forward and you'll remember for the rest of your life? Just a couple from this record, and things that will really stay with you.
This album is going to remain in my mind, the process of writing and recording it, at least, because it was by far the most unusual circumstantially. It was written during a global pandemic, and it was written during a time when I was literally not allowed to leave my house, lest I was going to the supermarket, which was, fortunately, I only had to do it every sort of 10 days or so. But so much of it was written under a kind of societal duress, but I am I've never actually felt more blessed in my life that I live in a place in Southern California where I have space around me. I live in the Santa Monica Mountains, and it's very beautiful, and it's very rural, and I have neighbors, but you can't see them, So we communicate with each other by you holler into the canyon, and it's like, what? Can I borrow some sugar? Yeah, hold on.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So very strange circumstances around the writing of it. It also was recorded remotely. So John Congleton and I were basically just emailing and FaceTiming back and forth these ideas. So I'd never written or recorded a record like that either. But some of the more, I suppose, rewarding moments in writing it were I was walking in the Santa Monica Mountains. That's one of the reasons I feel so blessed, is that I have access to beautiful hikes, and where there's no buildings, and it's basically just Los Angeles's version of fresh air, which is, it's pretty pretty wonderful. And so I was walking and there's nobody around, and it was just, at certain moments I was by myself with my dog, but at other moments I was with my girlfriend. And there were moments where it felt like we were the only two people in the world, and that's, in moments that can be quite blissful. At other moments it can be kind of terrifying. So it was complicated. I guess I'll say it was a complicated experience, but I'm so happy to have been able to have the opportunity to write and record during it, because it was making music, painting pictures. It's really essentially the way that I make sense of the world. And so to have a kind of an avenue to express myself, especially during such a unique and extraordinary, but also anxious and strange time, is a real blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing some of those experiences with me. Like, I got a real strong, visual vibe, of some of those things there. And, again, it's lovely that you've been able to have that. It moves me nicely on to my last few questions then. You talked about inspiration here. Now, part of my day job is working with young people who struggle with, certain mental health issues, motivations. They might look at you and go, oh, I'm never going to be, Brandon Boyd. I'm never going to have the success of Incubus, or I'm never going to write a record like Echoes and Cocoons. And there's a lot of these conversations that we have, day to day. And I'm going to make it, the way I've always seen you in interviews and obviously, in the music, again, very hopeful. You don't seem to me like you have many bad days, but I would like to ask you, if you ever have a bad day, is it something as simple as painting a picture, writing a song? What are the things that you do if you are struggling and you're having a bad day? Where are you able to pull yourself out of that? Is it as simple as just painting or writing, or are there other things that you do, even when you have a bad day?
That's a wonderful question. I don't think that only having good days is necessarily a good thing. I think that there is, it's funny that you asked that, because here in Southern California, there's a real, it's a thing, like to have no bad days. That's actually a saying here. I don't know, you probably heard it too, but to me, bad days are important. It's like when you have a pain in your body. Pain is incredibly informative. Pain is incredibly educational. And I would never wish suffering upon anybody, but I will say that the suffering that I have endured in my life, and there have been moments of pretty intense existential suffering, but also what's stuck out more is the physical pain that I've endured in my life. I've had more than my fair share of physical pain. I've had a handful of, I suppose, what we could call mortal injuries, that if they were incurred at a different time in history, I would not still be here. If it weren't for some of modern medicine, I would not still be here. I've had some physical injuries that were potentially debilitating, and I recovered from them, but I've never done well with opiates. And so recovering from some of these injuries, I have endured good old fashioned suffering,
real pain,
real
medicated,
physical pain that you can't medicate away. And just for example, it's coming on 20 years now. In 2023, it'll be 20 years. I severed my Achilles tendon.
Ooh.
So that's sort of like it's one of the most painful injuries that a person can endure, from what I understand. And I wouldn't actually take it back. I wouldn't do anything different. I wouldn't recommend the injury. I guess it fucking sucks.
Yeah.
But and I still deal with some of the damage. I don't know if you can hear my ankle clicking, but I have nerve damage in my foot.
I was going to say, was that a click? Oof.
That was a click in my ankle from air trapped around the scar.
Mate.
But but it was incredibly educational. And I know I'm taking a long-winded way to get back to your question, but
please,
bad days, or pain, let's just call it pain, can be amazingly informative. And if we listen to what that stuff is saying, we can transcend pain. We
Mm.
we can transcend spiritual suffering or existential suffering and become better versions of ourselves because of it.
Mm.
So
I like that.
going back to the sort of original sort of crux of your question, what do I do when I'm having a bad day? If I'm having a bad day and I'm really just, there's nothing to glean because of it, there's a few sort of basic neuro hacks that I've been learning about, and that really, it's really wild how well they work. And I've used some of these same neuro hacks if I feel anxious about something, or I'm particularly nervous before I go on stage or something like that.
Mm.
3 long, deep breaths.
Okay.
And holding your breath in between your inhale and your exhale.
Yeah.
And doing it very concertedly. It has a very strange neurochemical effect that sort of, it's almost like it like resets you. And I know it
Nice.
sounds overly simplistic, but it really, it's something. It does something really spectacularly simple, but does something extremely effective. And I would recommend it to anyone. And I've been recommending it to a lot of people recently, and even teaching people it recently, because there's a lot of anxiety in the world
Oh
right
yeah.
now.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's probably the most basic thing that I would share with someone if they're having a
Yeah.
bad day.
Yeah, it's a good technique as well. I know I was researching some of Wim Hof, you know, the Iceman. I don't know if you've come across him, but
Oh yeah,
he does the
yeah.
breathing. I really love his work, and it's something so simple. And sometimes people can, they medicate and they struggle to find how to cope, but actually something as simple. And I don't mean to, minimize anybody's struggle, but something as simple as deep breathing, as you're alluding to, can really help people. It's a lovely example there for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Okay, just before we do the press and plugging bit at the end, I'm going to ask you a question about legacy. Now, this means different things to different people as well. Now, obviously, people love your work in Incubus, obviously your previous solo work as well, Sons of the Sea, all that stuff, and your art too. Do you think about legacy? Is that something you're concerned with? And if so, what would you like it to be? If not, what is your attitude to the idea of a legacy as someone in the public eye and as somebody with a great body of work, such as Incubus and obviously your solo stuff?
It does occur. Yeah, it does occur to me, the idea that we've been a band for 30 years, and Incubus has, and so it's wild because I started making music with Incubus when I was 15 years old. I'm 45, so it's been it's been an indelible part of my life for most of my life. It's so wild to think about it like that. So the idea of, I don't really think about it on a day-to-day basis, but the times when the abstract concept, I suppose, of my legacy or our legacy as a band comes to mind is when we get sort of the random offer from some big like corporate entity to participate in some branding thing with some, some product of some kind that, myself or the guys in the band would never have interacted with.
Right,
we've
yeah.
never been offered like a Coca-Cola campaign, but that's a really good example.
Yeah.
That's when our legacy would occur to me on a more kind of like a little bit more of a place of import. I'm not opposed to working with a brand or branding something. I think it's just part of our culture, but there are what that brand might stand for. I'm speaking theoretically now, of course,
Yeah.
but what that brand, what might stand for, what their legacy has been, where their kind of, what their morals are, where their ethics lie. All of that stuff is vitally important to me, and it always has been. I've definitely been called precious before. and the older I get, the more I'm kind of unapologetically precious about things like that in particular. I feel like there's Incubus has been such an amazing experience for me, and I know for everybody in the band. And it would be just, I mean, we could describe it lots of ways, but it would just be downright foolish for us to align ourselves with something that could tarnish what we've created. And so that stuff does come to mind. Otherwise, like on a day-to-day basis, I'm not really thinking about it, if I'm being perfectly honest.
No,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely does make sense. And to finish off as well, without trying to push you in any direction about UK dates or anything like that, I'm going to give you the floor. What would you like? Obviously, new record, new single. What would you like to promote? Is there anything else you're working on right now that you'd like to tell people about? And what is your message for the people that have supported you and continue to do so?
Well, to the first part of your question, there are no UK dates on the books yet. We're still dealing with the complications of COVID and traveling amongst COVID and all these things, and it's really frustrating because I want to come to the UK for not only to make music, but I had like an appointment with a friend who does tattoos in 2020, and I want to come and just hang out. I want to travel. I miss traveling overseas so much. So as soon as we can, and I feel like every day I'm looking at the statistics and stuff and just praying for the other side of this thing, just selfishly, just so I can start moving around again. But in the meantime, there's quite a lot of stuff that I've been working on, that we're working on. Obviously, the solo record comes out March 11th, which is really fun. I've been prepping a Substack page. You guys know you have Substack.
I've heard of it.
So I have a Substack page, which will be hopefully coming out probably the beginning of February, which I'll be sharing lots of unheard music. A lot of it I just record at home, like demos that don't make it past the cutting room floor, but they're still kind of worth listening to. Essays, poems, readings of short stories that I've written, stuff like that. I also, during the lockdown, I started a thing called Moonlight Arts Collective, which we have a splash page people can go visit. I think it's just moonlightartscollective.com. We also have an Instagram, Moonlight Arts Collective, and it basically is going to be putting out fine art print releases from artists who we know and love from music, film, television, sports.
Yeah.
So people that, similar to my approach to creativity, which has been kind of multifaceted. I make music. I love making music, and people might know me from the music that I've made, but I also have been painting my entire life. And I've been doing originals and publishing books and doing print releases for the last 13 or so years. So we're going to be doing that with other people that we know from the arts who we didn't know painted. So it's going to be a lot of fun. That'll be launching probably the 1st of February as well.
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome. And again, second part of that question as well, I apologize. My question was super long-winded there. Your message for the people that are going to be discovering your solo work for the first time, and also the people that have supported you for years. What is your message to them?
My message is very simple and very heartfelt. Thank you. I'm humbled at all of your attentions for even a moment in time, but let alone for decades at a time. It never ceases to amaze me. I never expected that I would have a career in music or in the arts, and the fact that people are still listening and still care to see and hear what I'm doing, what we're doing, is truly humbling. I have a high level of gratitude for all of you. So especially in the day and age where it is essentially an attention economy. And so to have anyone's attention for any brief period of time is a real blessing. So thank you, guys.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Brandon. I really appreciate it.
Thank you too. Have a great day.